The cold was not just biting. It was the kind that took. It took ears first, then fingers, then memory. Then, if you stayed too long, breath. The man trudged forward, alone, through a world without color. The wind screamed like it had lost something. His boots, soaked and frozen, no longer creaked, they cracked. With each step, the fabric of his coat stiffened more, as if the frost was trying to turn him into part of the landscape. The snow wasn't soft. It stung like ground glass. The air clawed at his lungs. He did not curse. He did not speak. There was no one to hear him, and the cold would have swallowed his words anyway. It was 40 below, and falling. He had crossed 2 ridges already. The third stood ahead like the back of a buried god, blanketed in ice and silence. Somewhere beyond it, a village. Cut off. No telegraph. No riders. No mercy. A plague had settled there. Not the kind you ran from. The kind that locked your bones and stole your children by night. He had heard it 2 days ago at the last post. A man in a fur hat, shaking his head, said it flat. They're dying fast. No way through the pass in this storm. Let him be. He didn't answer. Just slid the vial of medicine into the inner pocket of his coat and left. He hadn't said who he was, but he knew. His son. The boy didn't carry his name. The boy barely knew his face. 20 years since he had left chasing gold, chasing escape, chasing nothing. But he had heard the name of the village. And he remembered the woman who had once stood barefoot on a cabin porch, holding an infant, not asking him to stay, just watching. Now he walked into knives of wind with bloodied knuckles and splitting lips. He didn't ask the land to forgive him. He only asked it to let him pass. A gale rose, tearing sideways through the narrow pass. Snow peeled off the cliffs like smoke. He dropped to a knee, pulling his scarf tighter. Every breath stabbed. His eyes watered and froze. There was no trail, no markers, no sound but the roar. Still, he moved, slowly, dragging one foot, then the other. He didn't pray, but he remembered. He remembered the boy's name, and the medicine in his coat burned against his chest like fire. By midnight, the wind began to die. It had grown weaker because it was tired of howling. He stood on a slab of rock beneath a jagged overhang where the cliff broke the gale just enough to crouch and breathe. The moon, veiled behind ice-threaded clouds, gave little light, but enough. The ridge still rose ahead, and the descent on the other side would be worse. His gloves had frozen stiff. He pulled them off with his teeth. Fingers raw, cracked and blind to touch, found the inside coat pocket. He located the vial, still intact. He exhaled slowly. If it had shattered, no sense finishing the thought. The cold didn't care for regret. He took out a square of jerky and bit down. It snapped like bark. His jaw ached with every chew, but he forced it down. Not for the taste. To stay standing. Behind him, nothing. The snow had eaten his path. Ahead, the ridge, pale like a bone beneath skin. He remembered building fences in Montana once. Men argued where to plant the posts, as if the land belonged to anyone. This ridge didn't argue. It simply stood. Then something passed through him. Not thought, not memory. Something deeper, like the mountain itself was watching. He stood, knees popping like dry sticks. Shoulders heavy. Everything he had left on his back. Everything he'd ever wanted ahead. In a house. In a village, windows going dark. with a boy he had never held. And he didn't know if he would reach him. He began the climb. The slope angled hard. Snow softened every step, turned stone to ice. Twice he slipped, once rolling 5 feet down and nearly losing his coat. He didn't shout. No one to hear. No time for pain. His breath rasped like torn cloth. Midway up, the world tilted. Not the ground his vision. Hunger struck like a hammer. Dizziness surged in his chest. He dropped to his knees, fists buried in snow. Iron filled his mouth. His lips were bleeding. He closed his eyes and saw her, barefoot like before, on the porch. Wind, a crying infant too young to know someone was watching from the trees. He hadn't returned, not once. But now he was here. Atonement wasn't for preachers. It was a ridge, a storm, a vial of medicine in a frozen coat. He opened his eyes. They burned. The moon had shifted. He was nearly there. The last 100 feet were a wall of scree and packed snow. He moved on all fours, teeth clenched, legs shaking. One mistake here, and his name would be gone with the wind. But then he reached the crest. He stood, and the ridge was behind him. Ahead, only darkness, wind, and a stretch of white that gave nothing back. He took one breath, then another, and kept moving. He started down just before first light. The ridge behind him faded into shadow. Before him, the slope dropped steep and wild, broken by wind-cut stone and powder-heavy drifts. The mountain offered no trail, only a direction down, and he followed. The first 20 yards were careful steps, then a slip, then another. By the time the sun edged the horizon, he was sliding half the distance, digging heels and hands to slow the fall. He moved like a man chased, though no one followed. The cold did. His legs burned. His arms ached. But the valley grew closer. He stopped beneath a twisted pine. His heart pounded in his throat. He took out the vial and held, still unbroken, still sealed. He closed his hand around it. No path remained, only deep snow and ice. Each step was blind faith. A misstep now wouldn't hurt, it would bury him. He moved. The snow swallowed his boots. The wind crept into his sleeves. Frost bit under his collar, but he didn't stop. A memory passed, like a flicker between blinks. The boy was 5, maybe 6. A friend of a friend brought news once said the kid was bright, quiet, good with his hands. Built a sled from scrap wood and rope. Said he looked nothing like his father. He never asked what that meant. Now he wondered if the boy remembered him at all. He broke through a crust of ice and dropped knee-deep into the drift. Pain lanced his side. He pushed forward. He blinked. There was something ahead. A shape in the snow. Small, upright, still. A boy, maybe. No coat. Just a thin figure, arms at his sides. The man raised a hand. The shape didn't move. Didn't flinch. Then it turned. Walked into the trees. Not hurried. Not scared. Like it knew the way. Like it wanted him to follow. He did. Branches clawed at his shoulders. His boots caught in roots. He moved faster, then slower, then stumbled. And the shape was gone. He stood in the clearing, chest heaving, pain rising up his side like fire. He turned in place, blinking hard. But there was nothing. No boy. No tracks. Only white. His legs folded. He fell forward into the snow. The sky spun above him, gray and blurred. Then nothing. He hadn't slept. Not really. Just closed his eyes once, leaning against a crooked trunk, but the cold made sure he didn't stay long. His back ached. His knees felt splintered. The wind had stopped some hours ago, but the silence it left behind felt worse. It was the kind of silence that made you feel like the only living thing left. The trail, if it could be called that, leveled out now flatter, but more treacherous. Snowdrifts hid gullies. Ice crusted over deadwood and buried holes. The next village, if memory served, sat beyond the narrow gorge. Maybe 2 miles more. He adjusted the strap on his coat. The pain in his left thigh was sharper now, a deep, pulsing throb. He didn't remember falling that hard, but he must have. Blood had frozen into the fabric, black and stiff. He moved forward. 1 step, then another. His breath rasped. His throat felt peeled raw. There was no spit left in his mouth. Hunger clawed at his gut, not sharp now, but dull, constant. He hadn't eaten since the meat the night before, and that was barely a scrap. His fingers were slow. He tried to flex them inside his gloves and couldn't feel the middle two. He couldn't afford to stop. He saw the creek before he heard it, a faint dip in the snow, a change in texture. The stream hadn't frozen completely. A thin skin of ice shimmered over black water, with frost tracing spiderweb lines across its surface. The current beneath was strong, even in this cold. It moved fast enough to keep the center from sealing. He tested it with the end of a broken branch. No crack. But he didn't trust it. He looked for another way. Upstream too steep. Downstream led into a tangled mess of trees and overhangs. The crossing here was the shortest. He stepped onto the ice. Slow. 1 boot. Then the other. Weight forward. Keep low. Don't stop. He kept his eyes ahead, but his ears strained for the smallest sound. A creak. A shift. He thought of the boy 9, maybe 10. That had been earlier. A shape that walked into the woods and vanished. He knew now it hadn't been real. Just a flicker. A crack in the mind. He told himself to hold the line to keep his head clear. But his mind still reached for the face. The eyes weren't right. The hair kept shifting. Dark, then fair. He didn't know. He'd missed too much to be sure. He took another step. The ice groaned beneath him. He froze. Not breathing. Not blinking. Then moved again. Just 4 more steps. He imagined the boy sitting by a window. Blanket pulled tight. Small hands. Eyes that hadn't seen enough of the world to know it was cruel. He imagined those eyes looking up, not in fear, but waiting. The crack came sudden, like a shot. Then another. He lunged. The ice gave way behind him as his boot struck the far side. He fell hard, shoulder first into snow, scraping his face, cutting his lip. He didn't move for several seconds. His chest heaved. The coat was wet along the side, but not soaked. Not enough to kill him. Not yet. He rolled to his back and stared up at the pale sky. The clouds had thinned. The light had changed. Morning was giving way to something brighter. He sat up. The vial was still in his coat, and the ridge still behind him. He pushed forward. He didn't know if the boy liked snow, but he would remember this one. If the man reached him in time, he wasn't standing anymore. The cold had taken that from him somewhere after the plane, maybe before the fence, Maybe before he saw the boy. He wasn't sure now if the boy had been real. The snow had gone quiet again. That trick it played, muting everything but your heartbeat and the wind inside your skull. He opened his eyes. Sky, flat, white blue, a branch above him. He didn't remember falling. His ribs ached. His hip pulsed. The snow beneath him was stained dark where it had soaked into his side. Not blood. Not water. Something between. He blinked. Tried to raise his head. The boy was gone. The door was closed. There was no boy. There never had been. He sat up with a grunt that scraped his throat raw. His teeth were chattering now. That was good. That meant his body hadn't stopped trying. He looked at the ridge behind him. A smear in the distance. Then ahead. There it was. Not a vision. A village. Barely more than a clutch of roofs and chimneys. Dead still. No lights. No smoke except one thin column from the smallest house, tucked low, its frame leaning eastward like a man ready to fall. He'd seen that smoke once before, or thought he had. It didn't matter. Now it was real. He forced himself to his feet. The world swayed. He steadied, pulled his coat tighter, and felt the vial still pressed to his chest. He moved. The houses stood like gravestones, spaced and silent. Windows boarded or broken, doors shut. Snow drifted up against the walls, claiming the lower halves. He passed the chapel. Its steeple had collapsed. A cross lay half buried in the snow. No one had touched it. He stepped through the narrow lane between buildings, boots dragging, every joint screaming. And then the door. The house with the smoke. He knocked once. His hand left blood on the wood. No answer. He leaned in, pressed his head to the frame. He could hear something. A cough. A voice, faint. He opened the door. The warmth hit like a slap. Not heat, just less cold. Enough to make his knees soften. Inside dim light, a hearth barely alive, a bed in the corner. And a boy. Not the one from the snow. This one was real. Lying still, eyes closed. Beside him, the woman. Older now. Her face drawn tight. She didn't rise. Just stared at him. He reached into his coat, pulled out the vial, hand shaking, held it out to her. She looked at him, then at the boy, then stepped forward and took it, not hesitating, not trembling, like she had been waiting. And he collapsed. Everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, the world was still. No wind. No burn in his lungs. No sting in his fingers. Only weight. The kind you feel when breath returns. He was lying on a narrow bed near the wall. The room was dim, warm enough that the frost had melted from his beard. A blanket coarse, familiar covered him to the chest. His coat hung near the stove. His boots were gone. He blinked. The air smelled of boiled roots, old smoke, and something faintly sweet like lard and wood ash. She was there, sitting in a chair by the hearth, sleeves rolled, hands resting still in her lap. She wasn't looking at him, but she knew he was awake. "You brought it," she said quietly. He didn't answer, not because he couldn't, just because the words would have taken more than they were worth. She turned toward him. Her face was harder now. Not unkind, just carved by years. Like everything out here. He's resting. Fever broke during the night. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It just was. He turned his head, slowly. Across the room, near the far wall, a smaller cot had been pulled closer to the hearth. A boy lay curled under 2 blankets, chest rising steady. Dark hair, a thin hand over the covers. He watched him breathe. She stood and poured a cup of something hot. Not tea, just warmth. She brought it to him. He took it. "Thought you were dead," she said. No edge. No demand. Just fact. He nodded. That much was true. "You left," she added, "but I don't think you ever meant to stop carrying us." He didn't answer, but his eyes stayed on the boy. Minutes passed. Then the boy stirred, opened one eye, then the other. His gaze moved across the ceiling, across the room, and stopped on the man in the bed. They looked at each other. No one spoke. Then the boy blinked, sat up a little, looked at his mother. She gave a slight nod. He stood and walked across the room. Slow, careful steps. He stopped near the foot of the man's bed, looked again. "You came a long way," he said, voice quiet. The man nodded. "For me?" Another nod. The boy smiled. He said, "Thank you," and went back to his cot. The woman sat again. And the man, the one who had crossed the ridge, the one who had burned through the cold, the one who should have died out there, leaned back into the pillow. The wind was gone. And for the first time in years, he slept without fear, without motion, without the need to wake. Just sleep. Like the cold had no more claim on him. He'd earned no forgiveness. But he'd earned this. Dear friends, if this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comments what you felt or share your own story. Sometimes just telling it makes all the difference. What do you think happened after? Did the old family accept him again? Did the mother ever tell the boy who that man truly was? Or was it enough, in the end, just to bring the medicine and nothing more? We'll see you next time, right here on Wild West Untold, where the forgotten stories still breathe.